The applicants are, well, of course it's South Orange counties, but the applicants are.
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Directors of Joshua Basin Water District for Wednesday, April 18th, 2018. I didn't ask anybody. Gary, you want to lead us in the pledge?
You'll follow after me. Place your hand over your heart.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Determination of quorum.
Madam President, we'll do a roll call. Director Flown?
Here.
Director Hun?
Here.
Director Johnson?
Here.
Director Luckman?
Here.
4 of the 5 directors are here, and Director Unger has an excused absence for illness.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Public comment. This is the time set aside for public comment on any district-related matter not appearing on the agenda. Government code prohibits the board from taking action on these items, but they may be referred for future consideration. Please state your name and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Any public comment? I read all that for nothing? Al, I'm disappointed. Thank you. Consent calendar. Matters on the consent calendar are considered routine in nature and will be enacted in a single motion without discussion. Any board member or member of the public may request that an item be removed from the consent calendar and acted on separately. And the consent calendar are the draft minutes from the last meeting of March 21st. Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous, they are approved. We will move on to item number 7, update on the hazard mitigation plan. This presentation will be by Gary Sturdivant. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Gary, hold on just a second. So just a reminder to the board that about 3 months ago, y'all approved us hiring Gary as a consultant, very well versed in the water industry and hazard mitigation plans, to write our own mitigation plan so that we would be able to qualify for FEMA grant dollars to mitigate natural disasters, as well as terrorism and a couple other things. And we have, staff has been working with Gary, the CAC has met with Gary, well, 3 members of the CAC, Tom, Gale, and Karen, and he'll be attending the next Citizens Advisory Committee meeting as well. And he's here tonight to update the board and go on YouTube. I don't know if it's the first time that Gary's been on YouTube. so that our public is aware of the hazard mitigation plan process and can get involved if they so desire. And with that, Mr. Gary.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Madam President, and directors and staff and members of the public. As Kurt said, I'm Gary Sturdivant. I own Sturdivant Emergency Management Consulting in Yucca. And I've been retired from the Water District after 25 years and was, well, vetted in the state of California and with FEMA on emergency management. We've held a exercise with your staff and started to work on the emergency response plan for the district, and then we stopped and put it on the back burner to get the hazard mitigation plan going. The hazard mitigation plan is very important in its own right, because if a emergency were to happen, say a large earthquake, and you did not have a plan, you're not eligible for any mitigation money. None. So with a hazard mitigation plan, there is a lot of things that you're able to do after and during an emergency that other agencies are not. And before the emergency happens, we're looking at mitigation of your infrastructure and what the hazards are to your agency and your infrastructure, what they would be like, what it would look like if there was a major earthquake, how many main leaks you would have, what reservoirs may be demolished or non-operable, and I've seen many of them. The last one was the Baja earthquake that happened about 7 years ago, and well, I think it's longer than that now, but about 8 or 9 years ago. But I worked for 3 months in Imperial County trying to put Calexico back together, Calexico Water District and Wastewater District. So there's a lot of information there, and I look at the plants, and we can figure out what's the best things to mitigate, how to mitigate the damage, the severity of those. Then your emergency response plan will look how you respond, how you deal with the emergency, and put yourself back together. But with a hazard mitigation plan in place, you can write grants also at least twice a year to mitigate some of the things like earthquake retrofit to your reservoirs. One of the things I saw in Imperial that was surprising to me is there was 3 reservoirs at one site, a 1 million, 2 million, and 3 million gallon reservoir. The 3 million gallon reservoir survived. The other 2 did not. And the reason being is they had vent holes cut around the top plates, so when that water started sloshing in that reservoir, it just ejected out the side. The 2 reservoirs that didn't survive only had the cone-shaped roof with the vent on the center of the roof. All 3 of those failed. So some of those things that just learning and recommendations in your plan. Right now, I've got one customer that is Orcharddale Water District in Whittier, and I just wrote a grant application for them for $3.5 million to replace one of their reservoirs that is not seismic retrofitted. It can't be retrofitted, and it's next door to an elementary school. So those are the things that we look at in the plans. They have to be vetted with your staff. They need to be also in the public eye. Kathleen has put the plan, a draft of the plan as we're developing it on your website. If you go to the emergency button on the website, click on that. There, just above that is a little header that talks about the hazard mitigation, and you can read the whole plan in there. If you have comments on that plan, call me. Also, the board meeting should open with a public comment period. So when we get to the end of this plan, we've already vetted it with the public and with anybody that wants anything to say about it. So then it goes off to Cal OES, and Cal OES reviews it and makes changes to it. They ask me to make changes, and when they approve it, then it goes to FEMA. FEMA has 45 days to make comments and ask for changes, concerns, recommendations on the plan. So then it's changed again. Then I get a letter from FEMA saying that we've adopted it, it's okay, we have adopted it in FEMA, it's approved, and then it comes back to this board for a resolution to adopt the plan. That's when we send it back to FEMA, and then you have a full-fledged plan that's good for 5 years. And it's good for 5 years only, has to be reviewed and updated in 5 years, and what we do is write a grant for that. So in about the 3.5-year, 4-year period, we write a grant asking for FEMA to fund us to redo the plan. So it's a good deal. It's a good deal. It'll pay for itself tenfold. And if something happens, and when something happens, you have that to fall back on. And one thing I like to say, if I use this example quite often, if I have a water treatment plant in a canyon, and a debris flow happens and does $1 million worth of damage to our facility. If you have a hazard mitigation plan, you can look at that and say, now if I build a diversion wall up in that canyon to divert that floodwaters from ever reaching my plant again, it's going to cost $1 million. Well, I suffered $1 million worth of damage to my facility. I have a hazard mitigation plan that's an instant grant. Instant. Now, if you don't have a hazard mitigation plan, you get nothing. So, anyway, I don't want to bore you with too many details. Comments on the website, and it's in draft form right now. There will be maps and pictures and all kinds of stuff in there. We look at flood intensity, 500-year, 100-year. We get those from Keith is working on those right now. And shake intensity maps. Dr. Lucy Jones did a great job with that. Don't think we're exempt from the San Andreas Fault. So, any questions?
Thank you. We'll start with the public. Any questions or comments from the public? See none from the board? Bob?
Look forward to seeing the
Gary?
final plan.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't have any questions. You get out scot-free.
Dang, look at that.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item number 8. Approval of 2 resolutions required by the Bureau of Reclamation to apply for Water Smart grants for meter replacement and mainline replacement totaling $600,000. Mr. General Manager.
Right, so we're searching for funding to help with the capital improvement plan projects. We've located 2 Bureau of Reclamation grant funding sources from their Water Smart funding program. Both grant applications require separate resolutions, which are in the board packet. Each grant requires matching funds, which we're now able to match with our new rate structure. I want the board to be aware that there's also grant funding. We're putting in grants for $300,000 for the meters and $300,000 for the main line. And actually, the meters might be $250,000. There's also grant funding through this program for $1 million grants, but we've chosen to go with the $300,000 grant applications because there's $24 million available through this program, and the Bureau has very clearly stated in their request for grants that a preponderance of the money will go towards the $300,000 grants. So we can apply for the larger grants if the board so directs, but Kennedy Jenks, our grant consultant, recommends that we stick with the $300,000. $300,000 grants must be completed, projects must be completed within 2 years, and the $1 million grants must be completed within 3 years. So usually the grant call for grants comes out in November, and this year BOR was able to get it out in March. The due date is May 10th. So we're working diligently to meet. We actually want to get it in on May 3rd. So hence the need for these 2 resolutions. We have to have resolutions from the board approving that the general manager can apply for the grants, or they won't accept the grant applications. So both those resolutions are in there, and they're pretty boilerplate, and I recommend that the board approve both resolutions tonight.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Any comments from the public? Did the board have a chance to read through the 2 resolutions? I don't want to just be voting on something that you haven't even read through.
Can I just comment first? Or
Yes.
ask a question? Are we good with the, I assume we are because you're doing this, but just to get it out there, when this kind of money, if this kind of money becomes available, we've got something to do with it in a timely manner? Because I'm aware that some of these projects, as you ramp them up, it can take a long time to get the project going, and there's a project completion limitation on these grants. So presumably, you're conveying to us that if the dough flows, we got a way to go. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
The mainline grant is for our first mainline project. It's expected that they will release or approve these grants and release the money in fiscal October, November. And so we would be able to apply it directly to this first mainline project. And we would be able to apply it to meter replacement in this fiscal year or next fiscal year. So they have to be done within 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have to do each one separately? I think we do.
Not the way it's written, but
I don't think the Bureau's going to check.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the 2 resolutions required by the Bureau of Reclamation to apply for Water Smart grants for meter replacement and mainline replacement totaling $600,000.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, sorry.
Okay, and it requires a
I got
roll
carried
call
away.
vote, so we'll start with the first one, which is the Water Smart energy and efficiency. And Director Sloan,
Aye.
Director Hunt,
Aye.
Director Johnson.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and Director Umber is not here. And for the 18-984, which is for the Water Smart Water and Energy, did I go up the same thing?
Yeah, one is AMR, one is mainland.
Okay. Do I have a second, or do I have a motion?
He motioned for both.
You want a separate motion?
Separate.
Yes, because you have to.
Okay,
you have to vote separately on each.
Yeah, I'll make a motion for the second one.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we will do a roll call again. Director Sloan,
Aye.
Director Hunt,
Aye.
Director Johnson,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. So 4-0. Okay, that's done. We will move to item number 9, consider revision to the budget cycle. This was reviewed by the Finance Committee on April 12th and recommended that the board approve it. Is that to you, Susan? Is that you? You want?
Yes. It has been about 14 years since the district transitioned to a 2-year budget cycle, as best I can tell. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. At staff request. We used to have an entirely different computer system. Much of this work was done in Excel. At that time, we had no kind of budget application within our software at that time. And since that time, we have now moved to our Encode software that does have a budget application. However, it doesn't support a 2-year budget cycle. So we have to do a lot of manual machination to make this work. And remember that in our 2-year cycle, about the end of the first year, beginning of the second, we come back, do a re-review of everything, and then adjust our second year. A lot of effort goes into that, on our end at least, and combined with all of this manual, dancing involved with the software, it is actually more effort now to manage this 2-year budget cycle than a 1-year cycle. There's no requirement for a 1-year cycle or a 2-year cycle, in the law, so we can choose what we want. Staff wanted this because it was easier at the time. It isn't easier anymore, so staff now suggests that we go back to the 1-year budget cycle. In the Finance Committee, we talked a little bit about capital and feel that even a longer term is more meaningful at this point with our capital budget, because we're looking at some really big stuff, coming up. So we'd like to go back to a 1-year operating budget cycle and really look at a longer term with our capital, and that is the recommendation of staff.
Thank you. Would the Finance Committee like to comment on that?
I think we went across this, through this pretty thoroughly, and if I'm not mistaken, Susan, you said there was other districts that were also doing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've been using this. I find that some of my peers at other agencies are doing the same thing. A lot of questions rolling about 2-year versus 1-year, and people saying, 1 year is not any easier, and perhaps they have the same software, I don't know, but, or, again, your second year, the further out you go, the less firm it is, and so you're always having to adjust, and it's quite a bit of effort at that second year time. So Anne, who really manages our budget for us, is making this recommendation, and I really want to support her and find an easier way to manage this.
That was a greater sense of accountability.
Yes, exactly. We're going to be able to focus more on 1 year at a time on our operating side, which is much more repetitive. It's the capital that truly fluctuates quite a bit. So looking out further with that is important.
Thank you. Director Hunt?
I fully support it. I think if it will make things easier for staff, I get the sense that Ann might get pretty busy here in the coming months,
Yeah.
not that she isn't already.
Yeah.
And you as well, Susan, on the administrative side. And I just think that an annual budget is actually a pretty normal thing in business, and then with planning out several years, but doing your budget on an annual basis. And if your software works that way and you're having to do extra work to try to fit
Yeah.
put this into the software program, and the whole purpose of it to begin with was, at the time, was to save time, and I can see how it made sense at the time, but it doesn't make sense now, so I fully support it.
Dr. Flown?
It just, the software, there's so many of these numbers and so much material involved. One has to acknowledge that the software is what makes it possible to do all these kinds of things within the time frames that they're supposed to be done. And so that's important to me. There's not any less accessibility to numbers, because even in the 2-year thing, there's always adjustments and such, and in the 1-year thing, quarter by quarter, there's potentially going to be adjustments as the money flows around, as our position changes. And so I just think it's a common sense thing to do.
Thank you. And I agree with what's been said. It does make sense because, as everyone has said, we do change it in year 2 anyway. We review it and make adjustments, so it makes just as much sense to do what works with the software. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion to revise the budget schedule?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Do you need roll call? I don't think so. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
That's fine.
opposed? 4-0.
And we'll be so happy she's on vacation, but I will send her a text message because she's checking her email, and she'll be very happy.
Well, we're very happy that she's happy. All right, item number 10, the reserve fund policy. This was also reviewed by the Finance Committee on April 12th, and they recommend the board approve. So again, Susan?
I'm going to start first with the policy itself. Kurt is going to go over the little presentation that we have and that you have a copy of at your dais.
Which Susan created.
Sorry. So we've attached, okay, thank you, the copy of the policy. It's been reviewed by many different folks across many months. We had some initial training, I'm sure you'll all remember. The consultant that provided that training reviewed the policy. We took his input. The rate study consultant, Alex, has reviewed the policy. We took his input. The CAC has reviewed the policy. The Finance Committee, I think 2 times, has reviewed the policy. It's been all through staff, and so a lot of eyes have seen this policy, and it's gotten better through that process. So Beverly formatted the policy, so it's Article 9 of your administration code now. So we've developed the table, which we'll talk about secondly, really was initially developed by Ann to figure out how staff is going to administer this. It results in some changes in our existing reserve account names, and so we've got to move the money around, and she did it for herself. And when I saw it, I said, huzzah, and shared it with Kurt, and then we started manipulating it kind of for this purpose to present to the board. So lastly, I think I'll say that the CAC wants what I'm just calling a friendlier version of this policy available to them on our website for the public to see. This is the policy that, you know, carries all the legal requirements and gives direction for staff, and you know, it's more high level. Let's get something that is more simple for the public to understand, hopefully, you know, a 1-page or something like that, bullet points, always with a link to the real policy if they want to see it. So that's kind of what's the next step. So starting on page 15 of your packet, I think really the beginning point, the purpose is so important, and I think I'd just like to read it here for the public. It is the Joshua Basin Water District Board of Directors' intent through this policy to describe how and why specific reserves are established and maintained, and to provide district ratepayers and taxpayers with assurance that reserve balances will be maintained at prudent and fiscally responsible levels. Maintaining adequate cash reserves is an essential part of sound financial management to meet both short and long-term financial obligations. Reserves play a critical role in providing reliable service for our ratepayers, financing our long-term capital projects, and responding to emergencies. Reserves can provide for the savings necessary to balance budgets during periods of diminished revenues. Think about our conservation mandate. Allow for emergency preparedness, assist in maintaining stable water service rates, and preserve the financial stability of the district against present and future uncertainties in an ever-changing environment. I think that's the core of why this policy was developed. So first, it's our intent to prudently manage the resources that are entrusted to us by our ratepayers. This is their money. Let's show them how we're using it and why we need it. The district will also maintain reserve funds in designated accounts. So we're going to designate what those are and how much money's there. That ensures our financial soundness and provides transparency to our ratepayers. On the next page, restricted reserves are not discretionary. So part of the money that we have is restricted. That is money that by law or regulation from creditors, bond covenants, things like that, that say this is money that is designated for a specific purpose, and the board has no discretion over how that money can be spent at all. Then we have unrestricted reserves. These are things that are have no externally imposed restrictions, so it is within the board's discretion how that money is spent. In our restricted reserve funds, we have the following types. We have our water capacity and our wastewater or sewer capacity charges. So those are fees paid by developers at time of connection that are restricted for growth-related projects. So we are obligated to expand our system as a result of development with these fees. Can't use it to pay salaries, can't pay rents or utilities. Expansion of capital facilities related to increases in customers. Consumer and project deposits. So customers give us their guarantee deposit when they set up their account, or they give us a deposit for a plan check. They're doing a mainline extension. Those are all secured. They belong to our customers and they're only spent for specific purposes. And lastly, we have our Copper Mountain Mesa Assessment District. So we have an assessment district. The landowners there have to pay taxes, which is passed through to us, which we then pass through to the bondholder. We owe that obligation to the person who advanced, who gave us who sold, bought the bonds. Those monies are restricted only for that purpose. That's about, I think, 1.9. Can I look at your? Restricted, $1.9 million is the total of all these restricted funds. Then we have unrestricted, and several of these are brand new, so we'll talk about those. Operating reserve account. So this is to ensure that we have sufficient funding to meet our operational expenses on a month-to-month basis. In combination with the cash flow reserve account. So remember, our rate study consultant recommended 6 months of operating expense as a type of operating reserve. Okay, we're splitting that into 3 months of an operating reserve and 3 months of a cash flow reserve. Our cash balances are not received. Our cash is neither received nor spent in 12 monthly increments, okay? Much of our largest costs, many of our largest costs, come at the end of our fiscal year. So we're building funds all through the year to pay our bond, service at the end of the fiscal year. So there's potentially millions of dollars of fluctuation in this cash over the course of a year, okay? So we will maintain an operating and cash flow reserve equal to 6 months of our annual budget, our operating budget. We then have an emergency capital replacement reserve account. So that's provided for emergencies, unplanned infrastructure, major earthquake. We need cash flow. Stuff is broken now. It takes months to get money from the state or the federal government for disasters. We need money up front. This is the fund for that. This is $2 million is what's recommended by staff. Remember that our consultant recommended $1 million for this. However, we had $3 million in this type of money before. We had $1 million emergency and $2 million opportunity fund. So now we've gone from $3 million. We felt like $1 million was kind of too low in that regard. So we're taking that from $3 million down to $1 million, or $2 million, I'm sorry. Then we have the Capital Improvement Plan Reserve account. So remember, in 2016, the board received and accepted the Capital Improvement Plan, which outlines a whole program of work over the next 30 years for capital improvement replacement. Pipes, booster stations, wells, reservoirs. That is $2.5 million is that plan of work each year over the next 30 years. We can't afford that right now. That our rate study didn't afford that for us, so there'll be, it's slightly less at this point in time in accordance with the rate study. Then we have individual replacement reserve accounts. So these have been established over the years, and some of them have been in place for many, many years. We know that equipment and technology, we know vehicles are going to wear out. We know we're going to need new software, new computers, new servers, things like that. We've created this fund, we fund it each year, and then when the discussion about vehicle replacement comes up, we've got the money already because we have this replacement reserve in place. We've got a building replacement reserve account. We're going to need to expand this building and our shop at some point in the future. That's what this is for. We've got the equipment and technology. We talked about that a little. Another big item in equipment and technology is SCADA replacement and work. Meter replacement account. Hello, we've been talking about this for some time. We need a reserve for meter replacement. We're looking at, over the next 5 years, $1.5 million, $250,000 a year over the next 5 years. Studies and reports replacement account. We've got, urban water management plan. We have rate studies. We have personnel-related studies. We've got, water master plans. We have all kinds of studies and reports that are repeated on a fairly predictable cycle. So we've built a reserve for those, so the $100,000 cost for a new water master plan doesn't come out of the blue. We have a funding source for that. We're ready to move forward. And honestly, over the years, a lot of those reports were not addressed in a timely basis because the funding didn't exist, and that needs to be fixed. So investment earnings on all the unrestricted reserves go into our general fund. Utilization of reserves for cash flow, so that operating and cash flow reserve, I can direct the utilization of that. I do that already. I mean, managing our cash flow on a daily basis is the responsibility of my department. Use of the emergency reserves per the administrative code is the general manager's job. You want him to be able to respond quickly in an emergency with money. Use of capital replacement reserves, and that also includes, and I'm going to fix that as we do the final here, that is the CIP reserve and the capital replacement reserves. Those are two different kinds. Remember, we have our capital improvement plan reserve account to fund our CIP plan, but we also have we have the individual replacement reserves, and they fund other capital replacement work. So I'm going to make a slight change there. That has to be authorized by you. You authorize all the capital work here at the district. Okay, that's the direction per the policy. The board also reallocates the funds. So as, we say, gosh, this year we need more money for our CIP plan, and our equipment and technology fund is way overfunded. Let's move some money from there into CIP. That rests with you. That is your authority. And then lastly, I will say, here's the summary, and I think it says it well. The reserve fund policy states that designated reserves will be maintained to allow for funding of the district's operating, capital, and debt service obligations, as well as funding for unforeseen events. Reserves will be established, replenished, and used only in a manner which allows the district to fund costs consistent with the capital improvement plan, financial plan, and rate study, and other board-adopted actions. The district's reserve fund policy shall be periodically reviewed and adjusted to meet the needs of the district. So that's my presentation. Now we've got, like I said, a little talk about the numbers is where the next piece is. So I'm happy to answer any questions here or at the end.
I think we've gone
Not
through
yet.
We've
Okay.
gone through this
Yep,
before.
we have. It's been around.
Any questions, Director Hunt?
No.
Director Flom?
This, in the capital improvement plan reserve account, you embolded this addition where it says 50% of the annual operating net revenue as determined by the annual audit will be deposited in the CIP reserve fund. I was kind of curious why it was bolded, and then also I was wondering where the rest of the surplus money went. I was guessing it went up here either into the operating reserve account or it would go into our cash account for...
Right. I don't know why the 50% is bolded. Beverly did that so we could take it away, you know.
No, I just,
Maybe it was in the original, I don't know, maybe it was a question, maybe it was in red, I don't really know. No particular reason, so we can take that out. I think the challenge with the 50% versus 100% is, remember that our fiscal year ends on June 30. Our audit is typically not accepted by the board until November or December. We're 6 months into our new fiscal year. The 100% of that net revenue has already gone somewhere. You know, it's either in that cash flow account because we're saving it for the payment, you know, in the 6 months later, the debt service payment that needs to be made. I was uncomfortable suggesting that 100% of that number should go into this when I don't know that 100% of that number is available to go to this fund, okay? And keep in mind also that each year, because our operating and our capital reserve, our operating and our cash flow reserve accounts are based on budget, it has to be adjusted every single year. As the budget goes up or down, that number's going to change. So we may need some of this money to fund that additional, amount relative to the new budget. Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome.
Excellent report.
Oh, thank
Any
you.
comments from anyone
Great
else?
policy. I read it. Awesome.
Any comments from the public? Any questions? All right, we've actually gone through this before, so we'll turn it over now to Mr. Sauer for the reserve.
I'm going to
The
show you
numbers.
some really pretty charts that
Good.
Beverly did.
Poor
Oh,
Bev.
you're getting,
Yes. The typer, yeah, you know.
she's the best.
you
All
know.
right, so the board, the public, the staff should understand that currently in our reserve fund policy, there's cash in the bank of $341,000, there's restricted reserves, there's unrestricted reserves, and the total is $9.6 million, okay? So we leave the restricted reserves as they are, as Susan mentioned. We're not moving any of that money. It's going to stay just like it is, it's 1.9 million. So that leaves us with about 700, whatever the total is.
7419.
7419.
This one.
7.4 million. Good, okay, so currently, without this reserve policy, there's 3.4 million in the operating reserve. There's nothing in cash flow because it's going to become a new reserve fund. There's $1 million in the emergency capital replacement, building replacement 78,000, equipment technologies 487,000. Studies and reports is a new reserve fund. It's currently at zero. The CIP is currently at zero. For meter replacements, currently at zero. Wells, boosters, and reservoirs, there's $382,000. That will ultimately end up in the CIP, but that's 2 steps from now. And the opportunity fund that Susan mentioned, there was the emergency fund and the opportunity fund totaling $3 million. This opportunity fund is $2 million, and it's being swept, and it will be going away. Hence why we're recommending that the emergency capital replacement be at $2 million rather than 3 or rather than 1. And so that's 7.4 million plus the cash on hand of 341,000 is $7.7 million. So to make it simple for the general manager to follow, we're just sweeping all that money and all those accounts is zero out. So that leaves us in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth column over, $7.760 million to distribute into these reserve accounts. So operating cash flow will be equal, and it's 6 months of our operating costs in case something happens and we don't have any revenue. Emergency capital replacement, we're recommending at $2 million. And again, the board can change these either now or as we go forward. Building replacement retains, gets its 78,000 back. Equipment and technology gets its 487 back. The capital improvement plan, we front load with $2.1 million. The meter replacement, we front load with $250,000. There's other reserve funds and the cash in hand on the bank, they all zero out, and after you approve the policy, you'll never see those again. So our proposed redistribution will be this amount of money, it's $7.7 million. So, with that, if there's any questions, I'll probably defer to Susan and Beverly.
We'll start with Director Johnson.
I'd like to just say thanks to the staff, Susan and Ann and Kurt.
And Beverly.
Cece, and
Beverly.
Beverly. Of course, Beverly. A lot of time and energy went into this. I think one of the things that we liked best about this was that it's sort of transparent, or it is transparent, and you know specifically where the monies are allocated. And so for tracking and accountability, this really is going to hit the mark. Plus the flexibility of being able to move it around if we need to when we get down the road for a particular project. So thank you very much. I fully support it, so I hope the rest of the finance committee is in concurrence.
Director Hunt.
I think it's a logical organization of the funds. It makes sense to lump some things together and split other things. And I think that having an emergency fund of $2 million versus $1 million is very prudent. I've talked about it before, the San Andreas is way overdue, and we're going to have a quake, and our GM, if it's Kurt or his successor, they're going to have to take some action quickly, and $2 million is not going to go that far while we're waiting for the cavalry to ride in, hopefully. So I think that's great. I can't remember if we discussed this before. Why don't you initially have any money under studies and reports, and when would that be funded?
It'll be funded in 18-19,
Okay,
and it's just a new reserve fund, so it doesn't have any money in it.
okay. That's it. Also, thank you to everyone involved.
Director Plum.
I think too, LAVCO has not done a service review of us in 6 years or 7 years. It's required every 5, I think, or suggested every 5. So that would be another one that would be, we'll have to get some information for them, and that'll cost money. We did indeed have a EPIC finance meeting.
Yeah.
EPIC starts at 2 hours, and we just about touched a 2-hour meeting. Gail from the CAC, seated right there, she's attending tonight too. She was very helpful, I thought, in conceptualizing some of these things about reserved funds and stuff. It was also kind of fun too. She's a member of Karen Tracy's Citizens Advisory Committee. Karen is the president. And I think everybody is participating on this. Also, I kind of think this is kind of flexible too, isn't it? Things can still flow as the need arises, not just in an emergency, but just simply where one part of this is weighted a little bit by a cost here and there, then money can be moved around. That's much of the basis of this. These the titles of these various funds and stuff are individual justifications of why we have so much money in our reserve funds. This is relative to our costs. There's been some attacks occasionally made on reserve funds in special districts, and the Hoover Commission brushed up against it a little bit, and then the media exaggerated some of that about billions of dollars that's being hidden and not supervised and all this kind of stuff. And I think that the way we're presenting this, the way it's going to be on the website, the way we're going to talk about it, the way we're going to talk about adjustments as we proceed through this rather exciting period of time, my hands shake over it. This is entirely workable. Thank you.
Thank you. And I missed the Finance Committee meeting. I was really sorry I couldn't be there.
I can tell,
I usually
sincere.
do go.
They're the
But I
best.
think this makes logical sense, and it's very clear that anybody that looks at it can see what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that's what's most important, is the transparency. Do we have any public comment on the reserve fund policy? None? All right. Do have a motion to approve it?
I would move that we approve the reserve fund policy.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you very much. The item number 11, the District General Counsel Report, Mr. Granito.
Well, I don't have a report per se, but I did come across a Senate bill today that got my attention for sure, and I think it'll get your attention. It's SB 831. It has to do with the California, the severe housing shortage crisis that we have here in California. And the legislature has paid a lot of attention to that crisis in years past. They passed some legislation in 2016 and 17 that went into effect last January, and that legislation did, and it instructed land use agencies, cities, counties, that when it came to accessory dwelling units, and I'll talk a little bit what those are. I think you probably know what they are better than I do. When it came to those applications for land approval agencies, it severely relaxed the zoning requirements and the development fees, and anything associated with development of them. And that took effect in January. But the bill that came to my desk today was in the hopper right now at the legislation. This is a brand new bill by the legislature. And it's also targeting accessory dwelling units. But this bill goes much further. First, before I get it further along, why I think we should track this bill. What is it? You might ask, Gil, what's an accessory dwelling unit? An accessory dwelling units are known for many names. Example, granny flats, in-law units, my favorite, cottages, secondary units, and more. It could be a garage apartment, a tiny house in the backyard, a basement apartment, anything like that. And it's something on the same lot with your main structure that creates another living accommodation. It's a dwelling unit. Hence, the legal term accessory is becoming a legal term, accessory dwelling units. Well, this bill, SB 831, goes a step further, and it implicates water agencies as well as sanitation agencies. And what it does is it says, if you have a structure coming to you for water service that falls within the definition of an accessory dwelling unit, as this bill defines, you're precluded from assessing any capacity charges. So again, that will impact your financial status, I'm sure. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It's noteworthy. The bill is still in the hopper, just in the initial stages, but it's in the train moving through the legislature. One public association that is preparing to vigorously oppose this bill, because they think it's not fair for new development to pay their share. Why should the other countries pay for it? Is the Association of California Sanitation Agencies. I just want to make you aware of this bill. I'm sure any day now, Susan tells me that Aqua has not forwarded any alert to you yet. I'm sure it'll be forthcoming. I just thought it was noteworthy to bring it to our attention, to Susan's attention, to Kurt's attention. Check it out. It could substantially impact your ability to collect any capacity charges with regard to a structure that qualifies as an accessory dwelling unit. And I don't know if that's a severe problem out here, I don't know, but if it could be, I would assume.
What's the bill number again?
SB 831.
So it's the Senate.
I think the implication here might be with the vacation rentals.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that right? Will these constitute accelerate, the way they're going up? Then we definitely should be monitoring this and getting involved and producing our comments to the author of the bill.
So this would only come into play really if you needed a second meter on one property. So if both dwelling units can be served
Yeah.
by one meter,
Yeah.
Keith,
What it,
right?
Yeah.
Then there wouldn't be any capacity charge.
Yeah.
But if they needed or wanted or required a second meter on one parcel, then we always charge a second capacity fee because it's more demand on the system. And this is saying that we wouldn't be able to charge that, so, we're needing to increase our infrastructure. Each new development causes, additional demand on the infrastructure, and then it would put the burden for that on all the rest of the ratepayers.
Yeah. Who's the author?
his name is, just a second, please. He's,
We can look it up.
he's out of Fremont. It's actually, it's a really long name. Just a second, I'll tell you in a second. I should have pulled it out first, just a second.
That's all right, we can.
Is it okay?
We can look it up and get letters off and say we're.
He is the same author, the same legislature who passed the bills that went into effect in January. Those bills did affect special districts with regard to preventing some assessment of capital facility charges, but it defined, it had a limitation. It had to be exceed a certain square footage. The accessory dwelling had to have over 2,000 square feet, something like that. This takes that away. It's any accessory dwelling unit now, if the language doesn't change.
Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. All right, we will move to item number 12, the general manager's report. Mr. Sauer.
Almost as dynamic as the finance committee report.
Riveting.
So the first one is an update on the low-income assistance program, and I spoke with the finance committee, I think, about this. We're pretty close to being ready to go forward. Low-income rate assistance program exists in several districts throughout the state. Desert Water Agency, Mission Springs, Coachella Valley are some of the examples. These programs are funded with non-water revenues, such as, in their cases, cell tower leases. It is possible to fund such a program at Joshua Basin through property taxes or fees associated with delinquent accounts, such as late fees and lock-off fees. And the delinquent accounts bring in a revenue. We can look that up, too.
Yeah, sorry.
So, oh, look.
75,000.
75,000.
Yeah, 425,000 is property taxes.
Yeah, and so that's the next paragraph, 425,000 in property taxes, 75,000 in delinquent fees. So any monies that the board authorizes for the program would result in less money available for annual operating expenses. That's something to consider. Examples presented below, I'll get into. So at Coachella, they started the program in 2017. And by the way, their board authorized no more than $110,000 for this program. The first year, they funded it at $10,000. They had 71 applicants, and it cost them about, at $50, it's about $4,000 by the time they paid the administrative fees. They thought that that was a pretty low participation level, so the board agreed to 2018 to raise it to $100 one time a year, and in the first 3 months, they had 59 applicants that qualified. So they've set it up in such a way that the customer account, or the customer service representatives don't have to deal with the paperwork. They've gone to United Way, and they give the money to United Way. United Way has an online form that applicants can fill out. United Way vets their income and number of people in the house and poverty level. They set their rate at 200% of the federal poverty level. And they tell us that United Way, they get an application in the morning, and in the afternoon, Coachella Valley hears from them. So it's a pretty rapid turnaround. It's pretty much similar at Mission Springs, and those are the only two water districts that I've spoken with directly. And again, administration of the program is handled through United Way. Employees and the public can donate to the program through United Way. And that's a summary. So I was remiss in mentioning that when I went to see Coachella Valley, so did Susan, so did Tom Kane of the Citizens Advisory Committee, Gail Austin, and Karen Tracy, president. So the CAC is very well versed in what these programs look like below. And the CAC is recommending that the board consider a program for 1 year as a pilot program that we funded at $6,000, that we set the eligibility requirement at 100% of the federal poverty level, and each applicant that qualifies would be eligible for $50 a year, one time a year, towards their water bill. So the reason I'm not ready to bring it to the board for approval yet is I still hadn't talked to United Way. I've spoken with United Way today, Julie of United Way. Extremely cooperative person, very interested in helping. Some of her concerns are that they set up the program with Coachella Valley at $50 a month, and they charge Mission Springs $100 a month, and they're not covering their expenses. So she's taking to the board an idea of some sort of transaction fee of 5.6 or 6% per transaction fee. So if you had 100 people, we'd pay them $60, something like that. She's concerned that all the other water districts have 200% of the federal poverty level, and if they get one of our applications, her staff wouldn't realize that it was 100%. So we still have to talk to her about that. They're in the process of even further refining their online filing so that folks can get on their computers at home or at the library, go to their website, apply, send in the information on income, etc., and then they can process it. So she needs to develop the transaction fee or what it would cost. And we are going to talk again on May 16th because they're in the process of getting ready for a United Way of Coachella Valley gala event on May 11th, which she's going to be sending us invitations to. So we'll talk on May 16th, and that's where we are. I would defer to Tom and Gail and Karen if there's anything that I've omitted that you think we need to tell the board.
I'll be making my report in a few minutes. I'm on the agenda.
Okay, so that's the end of that part of the staff report. 12:14. This is from Mark Ban, who's not here tonight because he's working on grants for the Bureau of Reclamation. So all the rehab operations are complete. They're in the process of fabricating an engineered section that will go in below the pump. All that will be done tomorrow. Our equipment will go down hole on Friday, and it'll be finished up on Monday. Once the equipment's installed, operations will begin flushing the well, and we're looking for an absent result, and a plate count of less than 500 colony-forming units, CFUs. So we'll take samples this first day, second day, and then a sample will be taken on Thursday. And if we get those results back, we would then go to the State Water Resource Control Board, Division of Drinking Water, and ask to put the well back online. All things going well, we could have it producing system water by April 30th. That's if all things go well. So that's an update on the well. The CEC Solar Grant Initial Feasibility Study should be received by the end of this month. The office remodel is going to start on Monday. So this is a $56,000 project that you all approved probably 9 or 10 months ago. So it took us a while to get the plans in place, and then we contacted 17 different companies. None of them bid on it, because either prevailing wage was something that the little guys didn't want to deal with, or it was too small for the big companies. So we revisited with a couple of contractors, and one of them decided that he would like to have his water left on,
Good move.
and he bid on it. So he'll be starting. So just as a reminder, Ann and Autumn's office, Randy and Keith's office are going to be totally renovated and take 2 offices and turn them into 5. We're also going to be doing new linoleum, painting the walls, patching the holes that have existed from, I don't know, 20 years ago. There's still
You were here when I got here.
sections of wall that used to be there that have been removed, that have never been repaired or repatched. So, in order to accommodate that, you see our new modular trailers out there, we rented those for a couple months. The project hopefully will be over in 4 weeks. That's with them working days, evenings, and sometimes through the night. The contractor has up to 8 weeks to complete the project. And rather than put 4 people in here directly adjacent to all the banging and scraping and whatnot, Beverly came up
Decided.
with, I think, an excellent
Yes,
idea.
yes.
And we're putting them out in these trailers so that they can actually work. And we're rearranging all of the parking and taking care of insurance and all kinds of stuff. And in addition to that remodel project, as part of regular office maintenance and as a follow-up to part of the HVAC project, all of the ceiling tiles, 33-year-old ceiling tiles, will be replaced. The 50% insulation in the attic will actually be turned into 100% insulation. It will be raised up, attached to the roof to meet code. The 2 exhaust fans that haven't worked for the last 10 years will be replaced, and hopefully that will contribute to a better working environment for the employees here,
Lower power bill as well.
and a lower power bill, which we aren't going to have to worry about in about 2-3 years because then we'll have a solar plant. All right, so grants for the meters and main line, I mentioned this before, 50% match on the projects, $300,000 each, hopefully from the Bureau of Reclamation. The auditor was here for 1 day. This time he came with a second auditor, so they did 2 days' worth of work in 1 day, and we're moving merrily on that. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on. We just did the reserve policy. Next week, we're having a special meeting on the organizational assessment. We're working on the budget. We're working on the operating budget. We're working on the capital budget. And I want to propose to the board that the week of April 30th, we have a budget and capital projects, capital improvement plan workshop, and talk about what our plans are and where you want to direct us to go. So I'd ask that you check your calendars and let Beverly know what days, dates, and times that you could be available. I'd prefer it to do it during the day because it will involve several staff. But if we have to do it in the evenings, we'll do it in the evenings.
And what's your preferred dates?
April 30th,
It's
May
Monday.
1st, 2nd,
Yeah.
May 1st or 2nd.
Okay. Okay.
And the 2nd is a board meeting, so April 30th or the 1st probably. Or we can consider doing a workshop as the board meeting, I don't know, something like that.
I think that
I
probably,
might-
given everything that you're asking us to look at, it probably makes more sense to do it separately.
Yeah, it's going to be more than 1 hour.
Yeah.
It might even be longer than a finance committee, epic finance
Epic.
committee of 2 hours.
I think I'm glad I couldn't come. Okay, well, we will, Beverly, if you'll send out something to all the board and get their feedback on what days work for them, and we'll work from there.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Moving to item number 13, director's reports on meetings attended, comments, and future agenda items. We'll start with Karen Tracy and the Citizens Advisory Committee.
All of my information has been gone over in this meeting already, so my thunder's stolen. I will say that we spent an hour last month going over fine-tooth comb details of the legislative material that is coming down with regard to helping low-income people pay their water bills. And we've also spent some time with the United Way program. So you know that we, 3 members of the CAC, 3 of us went down there, and we had what I thought was a delightful encounter finding out about how the United Way works with the water district, in this case Coachella Valley Water District, and how, to our amazement, they fund this thing to anybody within up to 200% of the poverty level, federal poverty level, and they don't get very many applications. They don't come even close to using up the amount of money that the board has allocated. I will be very surprised if that happens in this district, pleasantly surprised. But it happened twice in the low desert, and so I guess it could happen up here. I was pleased to hear the general manager's gone ahead with talking to United Way about how this might move forward, and that they might want us at 200% of the poverty level, because that would be uniform with their protocol, already established protocol. The bills that are coming from Sacramento make me lose sleep. They're confusing, and they're tortured, and they're not going to help us anytime soon. As district council reported the last time he brought up the subject, the 401 Affordable and Safe Drinking Water Initiative has passed, and the protocol has been designed, but they're not letting us see it because it conflicts with SB 623, the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water, which is also called a water tax. They don't dovetail, they don't mesh, they're not legal in their current language, and it's not going to help us until they are meshing compatibly. There's no forward movement there that will benefit us. So the movement forward using United Way has our enthusiasm. Gail has certainly gone to bat for bringing that to bear on anything that United Way can help us with. That's my fee for low-income review.
Any questions of Karen before she leaves?
I'm not leaving.
Seeing none? Thank you, Karen. Yeah. Public outreach consultant, Kathleen Ravitch.
Who's got the clicker?
I do.
Thank you. Well, how many happened to see the most awesome article about our garden
That was great.
in the Spirit Basin-wide Foundation, or Basin-wide Spirit, I guess it's called? The newspaper did an outstanding write-up of our garden. I've already intercepted visitors because they read this, walking in the garden. I'm going, it's just starting to leaf out, really, seriously. The first week in March, it was warm, and things started opening up. And that's when I was walking
through with Sarah Kernan, and then we had the freeze, and I thought, oh no. But it's coming back, the garden's coming back, the article supports everything we are doing, and they had hoped to have this out for Water Education Day, but it got bumped back later. So they didn't have it, it just now supports everything we were doing. Let me take you through Water Education Day events very quickly, just to show you. This was our 5th annual outdoor classroom, is basically how I see it. I went to Mojave Water Agency last week, and I did share these slides with them, but I had a totally different message that I was giving to the board, because they helped build this garden, they help sponsor, and they show up to Water Education Day and teach. So their board was not totally 100% aware of what we do. Some of their staff have been very involved, and they ask for money for us and stuff. But so I had to kind of just take them through the whole history of it, which we don't need that here now. I do want to share with you, though, the success of where we're at 5 years. Okay, well, I don't need that.
Doesn't like it.
That's what I hit.
Okay.
Mr. Key. Right, okay. Just so you know, in 2014, our first year, we started off with about 10 water topics, 10 booths, and we had 1 plant times 300, the Desert Miracle. We had to start with something, and we had that. And we sold many of the Desert Miracles to help start the seed money, the funding of this project between the National Park and the Water District. In 2015, we increased to 6 different plants that we offer to the public, native plants. And we had a few more booths, probably 14, 15. Fast forward to 2018, we had 19 species of plants, native plants that we offered, and these are hand wildcrafted, harvested, and grown here. These are true natives. So we went from 1 to 19. So the program is growing. We had approximately 35 different water topics this year, plus artists in the garden, food vendor, and music. It is growing, and even Tom has heard at the market, we get wonderful accolades and kudos from people who attended, and it's just growing because people realize they missed it, now they want to come. So I want to thank our leadership that was able to come and help. Of course they were going to help, but I really worked them hard. And thank you. You didn't know you were going to be tasked as hard as you were. We had in our booth alone the WaterWise demonstration station, the groundwater pollution exhibit, careers in water, bottled versus tap water, and we had lots more, a lot of stuff on septic and sewers and stuff like that. So our booth was really busy. This picture doesn't show, but it was, I have other pictures where we just mobbed. It was a very busy booth. Our project partner, the National Park, now we've had leadership changes in this 5 years. We have a new person who's in charge of the vegetation department. We still have Jean who's growing, but we've had a transition. So the changeover has not impacted the enthusiasm. And in fact, Neil has been with us, and he's right there bent over in that picture showing invasive plants and teaching on them, and they were so happy with the response of the public. They have a program they've started directly where people go out in the park and they try to eradicate native plants. But just getting rid of them in your own yards, this was a big teaching opportunity. So they were very pleased with foot traffic they had in the interaction. That being said, our native plant sale is, we hope and always have thought, is our biggest draw of the foot traffic. However, the second biggest one, okay, I hit it, there it is. That ground, that dirt was covered in boxes of plants that were donated by locals who are growing water-wise and native plants. Cuttings, what have you, it was totally covered. All you see left there are basically empty boxes and pots. It was swarming, buzzing with people. They're thrilled to come. It's like the best garage sale in the community, only it's plants. People are telling us they're going to come back where things are going to grow this year. So this is a very positive, it builds on our native plant, water-wise garden, and people are starting to take ownership of this concept of doing plants that belong here, that don't need pesticides, that ruin our dirt and soil, and they take little work once you get them established. When I was at Mojave, I brought in some teddy bear cholla, and I brought in some of the agave pups. And in our Mediterranean garden, we have this huge agave, bigger than me, it's huge. And it started as a small plant, and this is our 5th year. So we show people that, we show them, go out in the garden and see how big this will get. Native plants and these water-wise plants, they just need a little water to perform. And so now, plants that didn't have value, I mean, after all, the chollas, these are burglar and fire retardant plants. Change the message, and they have value. They were gone. Gone. Who would think? Usually they would be exiled to the dump. But people saw value now. It's a lifestyle change we're trying to impact. And yes, we have more artists in the garden. They're having a blast. They want to be asked back, and they want to bring friends. And I'll juggle that one as long as they're having fun. But it's good because showing what we value here in the desert helps newbies, people who are coming. Why do we see this type of plant as something pretty? And then it allows us to have that dialogue about, well, there are times of the year they don't look so pretty, but that's called survival. They know how to survive in extreme temperatures, and can you? And that's how dialogue starts. All right, these musicians, they don't get paid. They drop in, they're growing in numbers every year, and we give them a space, and they just jam and have fun, and they love our event. So it's building community as we're teaching and educating. This is a positive message. And we had aquaponics and hydroponics being compared. There are more and more studies, even in major agriculture now in the state of California, they're finding that the concept of hydroponics in these big nurseries are producing far more using less pesticides, and it uses less water than conventional farming, like 70 to 90% less water. So out here in our desert, when people buy their cheap piece of dirt and they want to become people who live off the land, and then they can't figure out why nothing's growing, we have to sit down and have that conversation, and we do this often at the market, that our soil doesn't support farming. You have to rethink. If you want to live off your own fresh produce, you got to do it differently. So this was a new popular booth and well received. And here I just want to re-emphasize that we are every year trying to bring in new topics. And Victor Valley College was here. And let's see, what's it? It's the Mojave Desert Resource Conservation District, and they were teaching on residential irrigation. And by the way, they want to come and do a free workshop for our community. They had such a great time. We had such a responsive community. They're offering to come in for free, which is cool. and yes, I'm going to take advantage of it. The Victor Valley College coming in offered a lot of water-related, I guess you call permaculture type courses. Now, our college really isn't thick with those courses. However, there's a situation now where Victor Valley College was at our event and Copper Mountain College wasn't. Guess what booth we're going to have next year? We'll find a spot for them. Now, the big thing that happened that was super cool was the Joshua Tree Chamber of Commerce stepped in and took over the hydro caching game, which last year we only did for children. We just tested the idea. And it had a lot of merit, so they came in and they took it on and they involved their businesses in our community, giving away prizes. So what it happened, it's kind of like a trivia pursuit. It's based off of like geocaching. You go from booth to booth to booth and you're getting information. And if you get enough information, you qualify for this bank of prizes. And if you get more, then you get these. So everyone wanted to go to every booth. And every booth, this is where we interacted. I drew up the question that I knew that booth was one of their main key mission messages. And so it instantly opens up the dialogue between that exhibitor and that person who probably would have never stopped at that booth, because what do they care about stopping at Edison or whatever? Well, speaking of Edison, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, all these exhibitors were just thrilled because they were having genuine dialogue over water education. And they all want to be invited back. So, I'm going to move to that one on Edison. Oh, did I miss that? Well, I'll go to Edison. It was in one of those other booths. I think it's across the way there. Edison has been to many events publicly. They go to the big ones, you know, the big fairground type events. And we have our little thing, 3 hours. Their representatives said they have never had so much interaction at a public event. Wow. I said, no, we had about 300 people in 3 hours come through. I said, come again? Really? Seriously? This has got to be one of the smallest events you've ever done. I said, I'm telling you, we had all the services we offer, we were able to talk about them all, and we had people signing up. He had a list. He says, we've got people looking for this, doing that. He says, we've never had this at any of our events. And I said, okay, cool. You want to come back next year? Oh, yeah. So they are definitely on track with us. They want to come back. They're servicing our community. They're talking about the water energy nexus, solar, the whole game. It works. So all in all, I didn't hear anything negative from any of the vendors except they wanted tacos. So other than that, I would say everyone's time was well spent at this 5th annual. It's been growing. Paradigm shifts are happening in desert lifestyle living with my desert neighbor. And I will leave you with this last little, see, this is just, oh, that's the Mojave. I want to say they have helped support this. You know, when I went and spoke to them, I pointed that out many times. But we have a little tiny snippet. I call it a droplet video. Now, I don't think, can I do it with this?
Nope. Just go to that one.
Okay. This is our guys in action. It was so cool. It's quick.
That's cute.
That was so much fun. It really was. So thank you to our leadership, our management, our staff. Keith, you always come through. Thank you so much. And our community that is supporting this in a big way, and our partners on this project, the National Park, and all the other organizations that came in. Special thank you, and next year will be bigger. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Nice.
We'll move to the Mojave Water Agency Board of Directors meeting. Director Sloan, was there anything going on?
Well, we had, I was surprised, it was one of their routine meetings where they approve stuff and go through the checks and all that kind of stuff. And then when it became time for director's comments, Jim Ventura, who was our area representative here at Mojave, that's the agency that's part of the California Water Project and wholesales water to us. He, during his director's comments, he also lives in Joshua Tree, he expressed sort of an admiration for the community of Joshua Tree and their willingness to accept the reality that we needed a rate increase here. He spoke, to my view, at length on it, and he did attribute a lot of our success to our public outreach program that we have here, which is managed by Kathleen Radnich, who just spoke, and the diligent and energetic way that she has presented through our newsletter and such, and at the booth at the farmers market, the need to do something. And I gave him, I couldn't speak, but I gave him a thumbs up there. He is a guy that is active in an almost invisible sort of way. If you know who he is, you'll see him around. You'll see him at the grocery store, where I see Gary Sturtevant. He's been instructive at the grocery store.
Now you're gonna have to tell him.
You know, you'll see him at Home Depot, and he came to the Water Education Day and spent a fair amount of time with me at the booth. I found him always to be very informative and very knowledgeable, which lends credence to when he says complimentary things about our community and about our program here. Thank you.
Thank you. Legislative and Public Information Committee, is there anything that needs to be, I don't know.
I reported on that last time.
Okay. And the Technical Advisory Committee last time was that wonderful tour of VVWRA, Victor Valley Wastewater Authority, and it's a new plant that cleans water cleaner than the bottled water you buy.
Oh, wow.
And it was absolutely fascinating. But the most interesting part to me was they had probably 40 people there. And there was one time where there was a cement walk about this wide between these great big things on the other side. And he said, now stay on the cement walk, because if you go on this and the plastic breaks, you're going to drown. I have never seen water people walk in such a straight line. It was absolutely amazing. But it was awesome. It's just a remarkable facility up there in wherever it was, Victor Valley, wherever I was.
100 million probably. Yeah.
And Water Resources and Operations, I haven't, my thing here, but I don't remember anything.
I can speak to it a little bit.
Okay. Was I there?
Yeah, you were there. Well, Kurt and Mark presented to us kind of an initial draft of what they were thinking in terms of going forward with the different CIP projects. And I really want to compliment both of them. Not going to get into any details, but just compliment both of them for their really rapid response to our rate increase. They're really hitting the ground running, and Mark in particular with his previous experience, that's going to really help us take the initiative in beginning to replace pipelines. And they do have some initial project areas in mind, and I think Vicki and I were both very excited about the rapid progress they're making, and to see it actually start to take shape and know that we're going to start breaking some ground and doing some work and demonstrating to the community that, yes, we're raising rates, but the money's not all going to disappear. It's really going to go toward what we said it would go toward and help ensure our long-term delivery of clean water. So, thank you.
And then next is the Victor Valley College Symposium on California Water, Navigating the Rivers of Policy Toward Sustainability. They had some excellent speakers. And actually one that I've heard before was not quite as riveting as she's been before. Ellen, remember her last name? I don't remember. But it was, I think, well worth the drive up to Victor Valley. Anything you want to add to that?
That was a good symposium.
Yeah, good symposium. Kathleen, anything you want to add to it?
Well, the networking was excellent. That's where Tony confirmed that his boss absolutely said he was out at our event for the irrigation talk. He's going to come out and do it for free for us because his boss was so impressed with his report when he went back. So he and then Victor Valley College, Neville Slade was there, and he says, we got to come back. I said, okay, fine. So that the networking there was really good. Talked with a bunch of people that have been very supportive of our endeavors. And it was good.
Thank you. Finance Committee, anything on that?
Just like to say thanks to the CAC for their hard work with the low income assistance homework assignment. And hopefully we move closer to that when Kurt finishes up his call. And thanks to the staff. As you've heard, most of the items tonight were part of the epic, riveting 2-hour finance meeting. So I want to invite one and all to come to our next one. So, thank you much.
Thank you. Okay, and the Mojave Water Agency Board meeting on the 12th was Rebecca, and she's
Right.
here.
She didn't make it.
Oh, okay. Well, she's not here anyway, so. Future director meetings and training opportunities. The Mojave Board of Directors on 9:30 and April 26th is Director Hund. You could be able to do it.
Which one's that?
April 26th.
Actually, I think Beverly's not going to that. Rebecca is going to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Caught me
Okay,
off guard there.
Citizens Advisory Committee is May 8th at 6 p.m. Right, Karen? Right here. Finance Committee is May 9th
Oh, boy.
at 9. And Water Resources and Operations follows it, which is always fun because they always go over. So, and the Mojave Board of Directors is May 10th, and that will be Director Johnson. And I would also like to say that I have appointed a committee to do the general manager's evaluation, and it will be the same as last year. And that's Director Flown and Director Unger. So with that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
What do you be like that for?
you mean that look there?
We'll talk later.
Thank you all for coming. We couldn't do it without you.